I tried. Everyone's on mute, so no one can say hi to me.
Hello.
Welcome to the Live Fearlessly Challenge, day 1. Raise your hand if you're excited.
So many people.
I'm so excited that I stayed up till midnight in Los Angeles to educate you all on fear. That's how excited I am. So we're in for a pretty wild ride over the next few days. And I first just want to start by congratulating every single one of you for actually accepting a challenge which is not just theoretical, but actually action-based. And when we decide to take action and lean into the edges of fear and actually confront our fear, our capacity for love grows in exponential lengths and waves. And the reason that's so incredibly powerful is it doesn't only expand your limitlessness as a human being or connect you to the limitlessness that you are, it's actually a great service to humanity. So we promised that this coaching call was only going to be 20 minutes, and I'm going to do my best to stay on time. So this is going to be the rundown. I'm going to give a 2-minute overview of the Love Out Loud methodology, helping you guys understand that fundamentally we are only ever making 2 choices in life. We're only ever choosing love or fear. We're only ever being receptive and open, or we're being avoidant, closed, withdrawn, contracted. And this is a choice that when you start to master, you really can connect to the quantum limitlessness, which is our human existence. The only thing finite about our existence is time. Isn't that absolutely incredible? So I'm going to give a bit of context to that. Then I'm going to introduce my very, very dear brother and friend and neuroscientist, Dr. Kaushik. Everyone wave and say hi. One of the most skilled, humble, intelligent individuals I've ever had the privilege of meeting, and he's going to give a 10-minute rundown of almost 15 years of research. Is that right? He's going to summarize
that's right.
in 10 minutes. And then we're going to spend the last few minutes doing a call to action. Does that sound good? I'll also set the context for the 3 days. Okay. So this is day 1, as you guys know. Day 1 is education. Day 2 is identification. And day 3 is liberation. Why is this the winning formula? Well, you need to know on day 1, education, you need to understand what fear is. We need to actually set a context to what is this elusive thing that for so many of us has kept us trapped within the confines. Why do we have fear? If it's such a limitation to our existence, why do we have it? Why is it a part of our evolutionary necessity? Tomorrow, you're going to go into the identification of how these symptoms of fear are actually playing out in your life. So you're going to actually be able to see in black and white, wow, okay, this is what love looks like in my life, but this is what fear looks like in my life, because there's only ever 2 reasons whilst we're not choosing love in life. And the first is you don't have awareness. So there might be choices that you're making. We make 35,000 choices a day. There might be choices that you're making right now from a place of fear and you don't even realize. So awareness is the first reason. The second reason is your capacity. So there could be areas of your life that you're aware you're not able to choose love. And you might be frustrated with yourself or judging yourself. Why can't I be more loving? Why can't I be more expansive? Why can't I lean into this discomfort? And actually, there's a big element of this, which is your capacity, not just on a cognitive level, but on a physiological, somatic level. Your nervous system might not be in a place to actually be expansive enough to lean in to the edges of fear. A lot of bigness and courage, but this is something we can train similar to a fitness. And on the 3rd day, and this is the most exciting part, we're all going to commit to actually facing the fear. So in 3 days' time, you guys will be liberated from this fear that is currently keeping you contracted. Hands up if you can already feel the fear arising in you at the thought of confronting this fear. Great. That is your growth zone. Welcome to the growth zone. The methodology of Love Out Loud began because I was exposed to a lot of humanity in my journey working in mental health. And it's like I sort of got a crash course in what it means to be a human being after being exposed to hundreds of thousands of stories from all different walks of life, and just realizing actually all of us are driven by one thing, and that's the desire to be loved, which I started to understand was the feeling of being seen as loved, and also the desire to love. So my curiosity became, why is that not something we are freely accessing? If love is always there, if it's something that's freely and easily available to us, why are we not accessing love? You know, what's in the way? And then I started to realize, well, it's our fears. And these fears can play out in a myriad of different forms, from judgments that we have that keep us separate and safe, insecurities. You know, the word insecurity actually spells with insecurity. So we create these insecurities on a subconscious level to keep ourselves in our safety zone and away from our growth zone. Because in the past, when we've put ourselves out on a ledge and we've risked that vulnerability, perhaps we've been hurt, we've been rejected. So your subconscious mind is like, fuck that, I'm not going to do that again. I'm going to create an insecurity that's going to prevent you from leaning into that edge and expanding your capacity to love. So these are some of the manifestations, the symptoms of fear that might be playing out in your life. And I started to see this is literally the only reason why we're not able to lean in to what it is that is most natural to us, which is the love, the connection that is ever present. And this is something that can be transcended with awareness and capacity. And that became the foundation that this philosophy that is Love Out Loud was built upon. And what's so incredible about it is it truly is the simplest, cheapest personal development in the world. When you stop, you know, thinking that you need to know all of these things and sit in thousands of different audiences and learn from gurus and all the rest, and you actually start to realize, wow, it's actually just comes down to my awareness in the moment and how I'm showing up, either leaning in with love or tapping out and choosing fear. And the greater awareness I have, the greater my ability to create the life that I want, because the only thing standing in your way of that pure potentiality is your own capacity to choose love, which is to choose yourself and to choose life. So as that segue, I'm going to pass it over to my beautiful friend who is just, we met after I gave a talk in Sydney not so long ago. And it really was just like a resonance and love at first sight, and just so much synchronicity in every moment that we've spent together since. So I'm very excited to introduce him to you and for him to share his work. He's going to come and teach at our Master Heart in Bali next month. And I know that this is just the beginning. Yeah, actually we have some tribe members who will be joining us in Bali. So you get a preliminary experience, you get the crash course before Bali. And I know this is just the beginning of your journey with Love Out Loud. So I'm going to hand it over to you.
Thanks so much, Nicole. It is an absolute honor and privilege to be connecting with your tribe and your mission. It's a mission that I've been so aligned with, and I realize that it is a mission that cannot be carried out alone. To impact 350 million people, it is a gigantic, force of love that allows you to be able to do that. So I was absolutely inspired, and the entire philosophy around love, choosing love, is basically, as you say, it's a binary choice. And we can talk about binary as in choosing love over fear, but there is something absolutely fundamental happening that predates even our own thought mechanisms. It predates belief structures, it predates religion, it predates humanity itself, because love and fear evolved the moment the beating heart evolved. And in order to send messages to the rest of the body, it developed a spinal cord. So the spinal cord is basically the information highway of the heart. And if we start looking at love and fear from that perspective, we realize that that basic connection, that union within ourselves exists in all life forms as well. And to put this into context, your heart dictates any situation. Say, for example, we are having a conversation, and if you feel threatened in that conversation, you'll experience fight or flight, or also the freeze response. So the way that plays out in a conversation is when you feel fear, when you feel threatened, you might go into the flee response, which means you'll be trying to run away from the conversation. You'll look distracted. You'll try to escape this moment. Also, when you are feeling threatened in a conversation, you might become defensive. You might become aggressive. That is all engaging the fight response. And in certain cases where you find there's a lot of threat involves, something like domestic violence, you might even find the body goes even further and goes into a freeze response, which is the body going into a very catatonic state. This position is basically the fetal position, and the idea behind the fetal position is we're protecting our vital organs. So the fear response just by itself affects us physiologically, and it affects every moment. It even affects things like our higher cognitive functions, things like decision making. If you're in fear, it's more likely that your thoughts are going into this tunnel vision way of thinking. And when you're in that mode, you're more likely to make short-term decisions. When you are in love and there is no threat, then there's so much more capacity to think long-term, because we're not worried about our immediate survival. Instead, we might invest in something that is genuinely an outpour of our heart. And as we start investing in our own mission, our own cause, the rewards might not come immediately. But because we are doing it out of love, that love creates the persistence to carry on in moments that you might think you want to give up. And over time, what happens is when you look back and all the products that you've created out of love, you see that it's been such a fulfilling effort. Despite of how the journey led, it might not have gone where you planned, but because what I believe so deeply is that end and means are one, the energy you put into what you do is also evident in the end result. It cannot be otherwise. You cannot separate yourself from what you do. So all these concepts around love and fear have a origin that predates our very existence. And we are merely the product of love. So when two human beings come together, they create through love. And it basically pervades every aspect of our life. Talking more neuroscientifically, so how does the heart dictate basically the fight or flight response? This is something that happens through any sudden changes around us. So the brain is wired to detect anything negative, anything unusual, anything sudden. And if there's any mismatch between the reality you're creating in your head and what the body perceives, that alerts us. And that alert is it's not a fear. What we recognize it as is surprise. And from that place, if it is a genuine threat, then the body starts getting ready for a fight or flight response. And in the way this happens is actually anything that is happening around us is connected to our breathing. So every time something happens around us, our breathing changes. And because the breath is responsible to the variability of our heart rate changes as well. So you might notice this in yourself, like when there's something really tense about to happen, you might be holding your breath. when you have a sign of relief, the fear is gone, you give a sigh. Like all these basic instincts are actually programmed into our own biology. So when our breathing changes, so does our heart rate. The basic principle is that every time we inhale, the heart rate rises. Every time we exhale, the heart rate slows down. This is a hardwired biology. The heart rate rises when we inhale because we want to saturate blood oxygen, and the heart rate slows down when we exhale because we want carbon dioxide to be exchanged through the lungs. So one of the very easy things you can do without too much effort is prolonging your exhale, keeping the exhale at least twice as long as the inhale. And by doing that, you are biologically reducing your heart rate. So that's one very simple thing that you can do. But also, when the heart rate changes, a series of very quick things happen in your body. First thing that happens is what we call the cardiac pulmonary response. And that changes your heart rate, blood pressure, metabolism. It actually preps you for the fight or flight response. Then the cardiac visceral response happens, which is changes in the organ system. So you might find that when you're feeling threatened, your stomach starts churning. These physiological responses are basically designed so that it empties your stomach in order to run away from something, or you can't be in the rest and restorative part of the body, which is the parasympathetic, while you're in fight or flight. Those two systems can't coexist. So it is the body prepping itself for a fear response. And then it ascends further. So we have sensory motor integration. So we start to initiate movement either away or towards a threat. That's basically fight or flight. And then in the brain, what happens is the moment fear is detected, a certain part of the brain called the locus coeruleus, which sits in the base of the brainstem, triggers an event in the brain. And this event goes like a shock wave throughout the brain and alerts us. We suddenly like, whoa, what was that sound? What was that sudden movement? And that is the biological fear response. What happens in the world we live today is that fear is not something that we perceive through our senses, but we perceive internally in our head. So it's self-generated fear, it's anxiety. And this has become so pervasive in the world we live today that it's sometimes normalized. And things like the fact that we feel safe in fear, we feel safe in our protective mechanisms when our protective mechanisms weren't serving us in the first place. So it is one of those things that we have become so accustomed to fear that we start feeling safe in fear. So it is so fundamental in what we do, what we perceive, the decisions we make, and so on. So sorry, Nicole, did you want to jump in at this point?
I wanted to see how many people were relating to this like specific, thing that you just said, which I think is so interesting, that once upon a time, we were experiencing fear through our senses because there was threat all around us in our environment. But because fear is so instinctual, in the absence of that threat in our environment, we still find ways to create fear, even if it's self-perpetuated through the mind. And I find this, extremely fascinating that in today's world, this is where most of our fear is coming from. We're scared to follow our dreams. We're scared to have the conversations that feel confrontational. We're scared to, put ourselves out on an edge and tell someone how we feel about them. These are like the modern day versions of what fear looks like. And I know like a big part of my journey through overcoming fear and stepping into love has been to realize that the physiological feeling of fear, irrespective of the context, is exactly the same. So if you feel really terrified at, you know, conquering a fear that seems really out of your reach, and there's a part of you that feels tempted to find like a lesser fear, I just really want you to, you know, listen to what's being said here and understanding that irrespective of the gravity of the fear, the physiological response is actually going to be exactly the same. So to just use this opportunity to confront some of the biggest fears. You know, one thing that I've seen in transformation, in doing the work I've done over the past 10 years, is recognizing that people believe it takes 5-10 years to change, but actually it takes a single moment to change. It might take 10 years to decide to change, but that change happened in a moment. It was a single decision to lean into the fear. And as soon as you lean into the fear, there's like a featherbed there. That's the crazy thing about fear, because fear is the illusion of what might happen. And as soon as you lean into that discomfort and recognize, especially in today's world, that a lot of it is just the story, the anxiety that we create in our head. And actually this feeling of anxiety, which Dr. K is alluding to, you know, the only difference between that feeling physiologically and the feeling of excitement, literally on a physiological level, they're exactly the same emotion. The only difference is whatever outcome you're rehearsing in your mind. You know, are you expecting the worst case scenario, or are you getting excited about the best case scenario? And when you start to learn how to train your mind to rehearse the possibility, all of a sudden you start to feel excited, you start to feel energized. You know, that the physiological symptoms that were being described before of your body is getting ready, that readiness can actually be leverage. You know, that can be leverage that's actually helping propel you to the destination that you need to be at. And actually, how are you meant to achieve your dreams unless there was a force that was propelling you into a greater growth zone, that was actually strengthening your nervous system and your capacity to hold? One thing that I often use as an example is take this vision of Love Out Loud, for instance. You know, saying a year and a half ago, we're going to impact 350 million people. Do you reckon that I was then in an energetic tension with that vision, so much so that there was fear that started to rise up in me physiologically, cognitively? Of course. But that was actually necessary. I had to experience that fear because it was through the uprising of that fear that I became self-aware, which is this hypervigilance that Dr. K was explaining before. Like all of a sudden you become hyper aware, you hear every sound. This is awareness. This is a powerful thing. So in having this energetic relationship to the life that I wanted to live, to the world I wanted to create, which is a world that falls in love, you know, with each other as a humanity, I had to be aware of the distance between the person I was in that moment and who I needed to become in order to be a container that was going to actualize that vision and that dream. So just the invitation to start seeing your fear as this beautiful point of awareness and this opportunity for you to lean in and start to strengthen your ability to choose love through that resistance, similar to going to the gym and you know, feeling resistance on your muscles and having your muscles grow stronger. If you start to learn how to navigate fear in these ways, then you become very, very powerful creator. And I would love you just to share. I know it's a difficult story to tell in a couple of minutes, but I just find it such a fascinating story. The story you shared with me, Dr. K, on how you actually came to understand the power of love, the experience that you went through on a physical level, because I think there's so much significance to this, that gave you this connection to unity consciousness and the power of love to connect us to infinite possibility.
Yeah, absolutely. So one of the experiences I've had, this was before I had a well-grounded understanding of neuroscience. So currently I do neurology, which is looking at basically dysfunctions of the nervous system, things like multiple sclerosis, dementia, things like cerebral palsy and things that affect the nervous system. It's not psychologically related. But before that, I was looking at psychology. I was working for the Department of Psychiatry at Westmead Hospital. And prior to even that, I did not have an understanding of psychology or neuroscience. And in my early 20s, I still had this very magnetic draw towards love. But because I did not have tools or techniques or understanding on how to create love within myself, let alone share it with someone else, I often ended up in relationships where I wanted love and I wanted to love someone, but I wasn't able to do it. And in one of these scenarios, I remember I had an argument with my girlfriend at that time. This was probably 10 years ago. And I basically went into fight or flight, and I was like, all right, I'm leaving. I'm going to this party. Do not follow me. And when I arrived at this party, I found my girlfriend there as well. And it was quite confronting to see her there. But then what was even more confronting was she started to flirt with other guys. And when things got a little bit more loose in the evening, she started taking two guys and walking them towards a room. And at this point, because I didn't have any tools to regulate my own emotions as I do now, but at that point, I kind of lost it. I went up to her and I grabbed her by the hand. I'm like, what are you doing? And she basically, pulled away, and the guys didn't know me, so they pushed me. I fell on the ground and they slammed the door in my face. And I didn't have a response to that. I didn't know how to feel in that moment. So basically, I got up. I was living in Bondi Junction at that time, and the party was about 8 kilometers away from where I lived. So I started walking along the coast all the way back home. And on that walk, basically, a lot of anger, resentment, shame, guilt, hostility towards myself started to arise. So by the time I was reaching home, the enormity of the emotions, basically the cluster of it became so enormous that it imploded. It basically, my body couldn't contain it, and it imploded within myself. And in that moment, all my pain dissolved into this speck and simply disappeared. And what filled that void up was as if a big bang had happened within my own chest. And that big bang was that of love, and love replaced where fear once was. And that big bang is still expanding as love in my heart today. So in that moment, the situation had not changed. Everything remained exactly as it was. But what was consuming me was not fear anymore, which was creating all of these really destructive thoughts. Instead, I was being consumed by love. So that basically was one of the biggest triggers for me to learn how to surrender and explore love from a neuroscientific sense. Hopefully that was short enough, Nicole, to cover the story. Yeah. Sorry, Nicole, I can't hear you. Your mic is turned off.
Amazing, I find this story. And I'm saying those that are coming to Bali, that is just like, I can't wait for them to hear the extended version of this. But what is so amazing about this story, there's so many layers to this. Like, you essentially experienced an internal big bang, really, is what you were experiencing. But what's so amazing about it is in the center of all of that pain and all of the fear was actually complete liberation, in the full surrendering of all of that pain and all of that, suffering and anger and angst and contraction, was this massive expansion into love. And it just kind of shows so many things, that one, love is the most powerful force, that in the center of all of our fears. And this is like, I think the biggest sentiment that I wanted to bring to you guys on the day one of this challenge, at the center of your fear, you know, when you actually go deep into the discomfort, deep into the pain, deep into the parts of you that feel insecure, that feel judgmental, that feel, you know, ashamed, that feel guilty, these parts of you that are contracted, actually in the center of that is pure love, is liberation, is your expansion. So rather than walking around in life trying to avoid, you know, an example I often give is, have you ever tried to avoid someone? Like, what happens when you try and avoid someone? All of a sudden they just are everywhere all the time, you know, in these like crazy places. I was telling you a story today in my speech. There was one time in my life that I was avoiding someone professionally who was Australian, and I knew them from Australia, and I ran into them on a random street in San Francisco. Like, it's beyond a coincidence, you know, and it's because wherever your focus is, you know, wherever your focus is where energy is flowing. So avoidance is taking a lot of your energy. So rather than living a life where you're trying to avoid these fears and trying to live a life which is void of all of that discomfort, what if we were to take a leaf out of Dr. K's book and understand that to go deep into the center of that discomfort and fear, actually there's the greatest opportunity for our own evolution and expansion, just how different our lives would be. And what you're going to learn, what you are now learning over the 3 days is a fail-proof formula to be able to do that. So everyone join me in a silent round of applause for our beautiful friend here. And I think we've done pretty well to get through that in half an hour. I'm not the best at keeping to time. Your homework is this. You're going to have a journaling practice. You're going to journal on the question, I'm going to post it in here. What does fear mean to me? And you're going to journal on the question, where lies my greatest opportunity for growth? Which is the perfect segue into tomorrow's call, which is on identification. And we're going to be taking you through a process that's going to help you identify exactly where these symptoms of fear are playing out in your life. But you're going to journal on these 2 questions, and you're going to join this Facebook community if you're not already a part of it. And for those of you that really want to push the edges and boundaries, and I highly recommend this for a lot of reasons, mostly because it can be difficult for people to speak to camera and speak to people publicly, so it's just another beautiful way to face fear. Actually reflect on today's learnings on a live into our Facebook group, and rather than simply writing your answers to this in your journal, which I recommend doing as well, actually speaking them into a camera, just your reflections on what's come up for you during this call. What it's also going to do is encourage other tribe members to see that actually when we have the tools and when we have the willingness and the availability in our own, you know, hearts to lean into these fears, we can live a life that is truly, you know, fearless. So yeah, by doing this into the group, you're also helping other tribe members see your demonstration, basically, because you guys are the pioneers. Give yourselves a pat on the back in doing this challenge. First time we've ever run this challenge, and to do this work in 3 days is no mean feat. So I'm very, very proud of you all. Just whilst I find this last link for you, if there's any burning questions, just comment them in this box and I will endeavour to answer them. Probably just logistical questions. I know you probably have a million questions for Dr. K. Maybe actually, what is the best way for these guys to stay connected to your work?
So I have all the social media platforms, so Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, website, they all have the same handle, Dr. Kaushik Ram. And I can type my name in here. So yeah, through any of those media channels, you can get in touch with me. And yeah, there's lots more information on my website. And yeah, do stay in touch.
Or come to Bali. I've also put the Love Out Loud URL in here, and I'm also going to post Sarah's Calendly link. Sarah, if you could wave your hand, a beautiful team member in Love Out Loud who takes inquiry calls if you guys have any questions about Love Out Loud. This is a link that if you click through, you can book a meeting directly with Sarah about any of our upcoming events. So that is logistically the easiest way to do that. You're in Bali now. Oh my God, why are you not staying in Bali to attend our amazing retreats? I don't know. Maybe you can extend your flight out. Dr. K, thank you so much for your time. We have another special guest in tomorrow's call. It's the same time tomorrow. Your homework, answering these 2 questions in your journal, and for those who are feeling very fearless, sharing in a live into the group. I actually recommend doing it now or now-ish whilst it's fresh. Yeah, because the other lesson, just quickly, is the more you hesitate, the harder things get. And that's because your prefrontal cortex starts to shut down after 5 seconds of hesitation, because your brain's reading that as threat. So the better you get at just being responsive and leaning into fear as it comes up and as it arises, the more skillful you become at using fear as that leverage for growth. So the challenge starts now. Love all of you guys. If there's anyone on this call or watching the replay that this is your first touch point to the Love Out Loud community, I also just want to take a moment to welcome you to our amazing family of tens of thousands of people all over the world. You are a part of a momentous revolution of love that is now active on the planet. Our vision is to impact 350 million people, aka 4% of the global population, by the end of this year, which is in physics suggested to be the tipping point. So once you engage this amount of people in an embodied message, the rest of the human population shift. The reason that's important is because we need to re-baseline from a place of fear into love if we want to really be serious about finding true sustainable solutions to some of the biggest global crises that we're seeing on the planet. Because ultimately, when we are in a state of love, those solutions will come to us clearly and effortlessly. So that's a bit of the why behind the movement. But if you follow those URLs or you join our community, there's information across all of those platforms. So much love to all of you guys, and I will see you tomorrow night. I'll see you in the Facebook group, actually. Make sure you save it, Kate.
Yeah, I got it.
Yeah.
Love you.
Love you guys.
See you in Bali, Dr. K.
Yeah, absolutely.
Can't wait.
All right.
Goodbye.